After Deliverance in 1971, director John Boorman wanted to do a dramatisation of J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings. While adapting the screenplay for United Artists, he became inspired to come up with a whole new concept for a fantasy sci-fi film titled Zardoz. While preparing to do Tolkien's Lord of the Rings novels, the studio suddenly became hesitant about producing film versions of the classic books, mostly due to the amount they would cost to film. So the idea to produce movies was cancelled by the studio. Boorman would then put all his focus back on his bold film idea titled Zardoz. He would collaborate with longtime collaborator William Stair to work on the screenplay. Boorman stated that he wanted to make a film about the problems of us hurtling at such a rate into the future that our emotions are lagging behind. The original draft would be set 5 years into the future. Originally his story would be about a university lecturer who becomes obsessed with a young girl who has disappeared. He goes on a search to seek her out in various communes that she has lived in. For research, Boorman would visit a number of communes, but he decided to change the setting and story and set the story in a post-apocalyptic world in the future of 2293. The film is about an unseen god who speaks to a race of primitive people in the Outlands called the Brutals through a large statue of a head by the name of Zardoz. The head tells them that once they die, they will be transported into a vortex where they will become immortals and live happily. In reality, Zardoz, who is deceiving and controlling the people, makes up a philosophy that all killing is good and procreation is the root of all evil. He also has the power to grant eternal life or death. Zardoz is in fact a man called Arthur Frayne, who is kind of like the Wizard of Oz, who is from an advanced race called the Eternals, who live in a vortex, who are immortal and do not age. If they do die, their bodies undergo reconstruction. They do not believe in procreation in their society, which has reached perfection. Human acts, like sex and sleep, have been phased out, and all major decisions are achieved through a democracy. The Eternals, no matter how immortal, are still not immune to sickness and disease. Zardoz has armed a small group called the Exterminators with guns to kill anyone who goes against him. A man named Zed refuses to accept the philosophy of Zardoz and be oppressed. He embarks on a quest to expose the corrupt society he lives in. Boorman said he wanted the story to be told in the form of a mystery with clues and riddles which unfold, with the truth slowly being peeled away. While writing the script, Boorman was influenced by the writings of authors including T.S. Eliot and Tolkien, while drawing inspiration from medieval Arthurian quests. His main inspiration, though, was from Frank L. Baum's famous Oz stories. The title Zardoz is taken out of the title Wizard of Oz by removing the first two W-I letters from the word wizard, and also the middle word of, forming the word Zardoz. Zardoz is based on the character the Wizard of Oz, a famous character that appeared in Frank Baum's series of Oz books. Boorman remarked, the film's about inner rather than outer space. It's closer to better science fiction literature, which is more metaphysical. To Boorman's disappointment, all the studios would pass on the idea, and none of them wanted to do it. The director remarked, even Warner's didn't want to do it, even though I'd made a shitload of money for them. His then agent, David Begelman, knew the head of 20th Century Fox had wanted to make a film with the director and offered the executive the script to read, but insisted on a decision within 2 hours. Begelman told him, it's either yes or no. 20th Century Fox were baffled by the overall concept of the film. Boorman said, the Fox guy came to London and I was very nervous, so we went to lunch whilst he read the script. When he finally came out of his office, his hand was shaking, clearly with no idea of what to make of it, but the studio eventually agreed to finance the film. A number of high-profile stars were offered the role of Zed. At one point, even Richard Harris was offered the part, but Boorman never heard back from the star. In April of 1973, Burt Reynolds was placed in the role, but he would pull out due to an illness. Reynolds was originally signed on because the director had worked with him before on Deliverance. Sean Connery was then signed on in the role of Zed. At this time, Connery had just finished filming the Bond film Diamonds Are Forever and wasn't getting any more jobs, so he agreed to do the film. Connery was signed on in May of 1973, a week before filming was to commence. Boorman would offer Connery just $200,000 to play the role. Charlotte Rampling was hired as the female lead character, Consuela, for the exteriors and most of the interiors. Zardoz was shot around the County Wicklow, east of Ireland. The dramatic wasteland scenes were shot in Kilmacrenog and Lagala Mountain, which is near Boorman's home in Animo. Sean Connery stayed at the Boorman family house and would even pay rent at the end of every week to Boorman's wife. Boorman would also use the location for more films, one of them which would include Excalibur. Many of the crew and supporting actors were Irish. Principal photography for Zardoz took place from May to August of 1973. The extras were played entirely by the members of the Irish travelling community. John Boorman remarked, "They were the best extras I've ever had on any picture." Boorman said that due to the political and cultural conditions in Ireland at the time, it affected his production, saying that it was very difficult to get women to bare their breasts. Nudity was a prominent feature in several of the scenes. He also added that the ban on importing rifles, which was imposed because of the IRA activity, the use of the large number of rifles in the film would nearly prevent the movie from being made. Most of the costumes were designed to be extremely revealing, as the Brutals were a savage race. The costumes consisted of just thigh-high leather boots, crossed bandoliers, and a pair of shorts. In one scene, Sean Connery appears in drag as a bride. Connery initially would feel very uncomfortable about doing the scene. To help keep costs down, Connery would use his own car and drive himself to the set. Boorman's own company, John Boorman Productions Limited, was based in Dublin. It was rumoured that Stanley Kubrick was a technical advisor on the film. Well-respected cinematographer Jeffrey Arnsworth was hired and filmed the scenes with the lens wide open. Fog filters were used on the camera, with smoke machines used on the set to achieve a diffused, more impressionistic look. Unfortunately, this would compromise the picture quality of the film. The Renegade's Rest Home was filmed inside the work canteen of Ardmore Studios in Ireland. For the score, composer David Munro was hired and was instructed by the director to use a variety of medieval instruments, which included flutes, medieval bells and gems horns, plus samples of Beethoven's sevenths were used for the score. The soundtrack was very unique in style. Radio spots were used to promote the film, and the spots were in fact narrated by Rod Serling. Zardoz was released in cinemas on February the 6th of 1974 in Los Angeles and New York. The film straight away received terrible reviews, but some critics enjoyed the film and loved the unique and original concept. Boorman would call his film a very indulgent and personal movie. Critics would also praise the ambition and scope of the film, while some found it unconvincing and confusing. Zardoz would, however, baffle audiences, and people failed to understand the film's way-out analogies and its philosophical jargon. Word spread very quickly that Zardoz was not worth watching, and soon cinemas showing the bizarre sci-fi were left almost empty. Ticket sales would drop, and with a budget of $1.57 million, the film would only make $1.8 million at the box office, and was considered a commercial failure. Zardoz has since developed a huge cult following, and recently a critic for the Chicago Reader would call it John Boorman's most underrated film, and a visually striking sci-fi adventure. Zardoz has also been called Boorman's finest film, and a wonderfully eccentric and visually exciting sci-fi quest that deserves reappraisal. Zardoz is to me a very creative, clever and visually stunning film. The film certainly left critics and audiences baffled with the bizarre concept and story. Zardoz is truly one of the most memorable pieces of sci-fi cinema from the 70s. My name's Jonathan. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video and like what you see on my channel, please subscribe, and if you would like to become a patron on my Patreon, click on the link below.